Democrats argue Bill Clinton is not the first president to have a shadow over his administration because of campaign money. Are the Democrats right? A clue lies in some of today's partisan rhetoric.
We honor the spirit of Abraham Lincoln by putting a premium on his beliefs, not a price on his bedroom.
The Lincoln bedroom was never sold. That was one more false story we have had to endure.
Today, the Lincoln bedroom on the second story of the White House may be a symbol of integrity in American government, but in Lincoln's day, it wasn't that, or even a bedroom. It was an office where the newly inaugurated president met with friends and campaign contributors who lined the halls of the White House, seeking government patronage jobs as rewards for their political support. Lincoln had gotten elected by outspending opponent Stephen Douglas 2-1, waging the first $100,000 campaign in U.S. history, with heavy backing from the emerging railroad industry.
Those railroad interests were hugely rewarded over the next several years. They got all kinds of special deals and subsidies to build the railroads across America.
Liquor interests contributed heavily to Franklin Roosevelt, who later repealed Prohibition. John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson rewarded big contributors with government contracts and cabinet briefings and even meetings with the president.
The bottom line is presidents have gotten in bed with people that wanted favors from the government, and they've gotten money for the party and for their election. And that goes back a good 200 years.
But it was the excesses under Republican Richard Nixon that so stunned the nation that they led to the modern era's biggest effort to clean up political giving. Nixon's 1972 re-election campaign traded favors for cash. Maurice Stans and John Connolly arranged a $2 million donation from the Associated Milk Producers, made just hours before an increase in government milk price supports was announced. And when Chicago insurance giant W. Clement Stone made an individual contribution of $2 million, the voters cried foul.
Watergate was the spur for what was actually a pretty good law that was passed in 1974 that limited contributions by individuals and political action committees.
The reform measure seemed to work pretty well at first. But then a series of rulings by the Federal Election Commission essentially created a new category of campaign funding called soft money, allowing political parties to accept large checks not intended for spending by individual candidates. Most analysts say soft money's impact started in '88.
In '92, it was huge, and in '96, both parties raised and spent 3 times as much soft money as in 1992. It exploded. It has destroyed the law that was passed in 1974. It makes a mockery of it. Both parties used it for purposes that certainly appear to be illegal.
Neither did the use or abuse of the White House begin last year, argues Michigan Democratic Senator Carl Levin. The leading proponent of the Republicans Do It Too defense, Levin is armed with stacks of documents to prove his point, including an invitation to a dinner for George Bush in 1992.
If you buy enough tables, you get a private reception hosted by President and Mrs. Bush at the White House. It's right in the invitation. And down here it says attendance at all events is limited, benefits based on receipts.
The biggest contributor to that dinner proves Roger Tamraz wasn't the first shadowy character to donate a small fortune just to get close to a president.
Michael Kojima with Bush is my favorite all-time example, a fellow who had no known assets and 2 ex-wives looking for child support, and he's sitting at the dais with the President of the United States at a victory dinner here in Washington, and he's giving $500,000 to the party.
This is a letter to the Prime Minister of Japan, introducing Mr. Kojima, saying that this major contributor is just a terrific man. He happened to be the biggest deadbeat dad, by the way, in California. The embassy in Japan was used by the Republican National Committee to set up appointments for Mr. Kojima, and In this letter, it is represented to the Prime Minister of Japan that Mr. Kojima has a message from the President.
And Levin says dialing for dollars began with Ronald Reagan, not Al Gore. Documents in Reagan's own presidential library indicate he was coached by his White House staff in a series of fundraising calls between 1981 and 88. One was to the Republican Eagles, a group of big contributors meeting at the Commerce Department in 1982.
President Reagan said, "You got all my cabinet down there with you. I'm sending Secretary Schultz, Secretary Regan, other members of the cabinet over to keep you abreast of what's going on. In fact, you'll be seeing more of my cabinet today than I will." That's to the major contributors, the Republican Party meeting on government property. And then he says, "Let me say to you, Eagles, how important your contributions are to the Republican Party."
Some analysts liken the two political parties' chase for soft money to an ever-escalating arms race.
It seems that each party moves the sleazeball down the field a little more in new ways.
The only way we're going to really get a solution is if people acknowledge the fact, hey, both parties have been doing it.
It might make Republicans squirm to hear it now, but when President Bush's spokesman, Marlin Fitzwater, was asked about that 1992 fundraising dinner, he told the New York Times, quote, "It's buying access to the system, yes. That's what the political parties and the political operation is all about."